All right, this is a bit more naked wall.
And you're wearing white. Look at this.
I know.
Now we can't even see.
No, it says just cinematographer.
Like a floating head.
Yeah, cinematographer's nightmare. So I thought I had seen Vanilla Sky.
Uh-huh.
Turns out I didn't.
Oh, okay.
So I was kind of like, no, wait. Maybe I was thinking about Eyes Wide Shut, or maybe I was thinking about something else, but I definitely hadn't seen it. And
Well, I will tell you one thing, that Eyes Wide Shut was made by...
Kubrick, right?
What?
Kubrick.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. Eyes Wide Shut was made by Kubrick, yeah. There's a movie called Abre los Ojos, which is a Spanish movie that was made by, trying to think of his name now. It's escaping me for the moment, but I'll come back to it. In any event, it was a Spanish movie. Penelope Cruz was in it.
Okay.
And it had a different, it's the same exact story as Vanilla Sky. And it was done before Vanilla Sky. And it's called Abre los Ojos, meaning open your eyes.
Oh.
Which is what, that was the name in Spanish. And it was a big hit, but it was, Spanish language movie. And in a way, in a very specific way, Vanilla Sky is a cover of that movie. Just like a song is being covered by a different artist. Mm-hmm. It's a different, it's basically almost the same movie. When you look at the original in Spanish, and you can see it with subtitles, and you probably should see it now that you've seen Vanilla Sky, because you'd be amazed. It's so similar in so many ways. But it was a movie.
Was that intentional? I mean, was this
Alejandro? The name of the guy who did it was Amenábar, was the director, and he was the same director who directed the movie The Others with Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
And he did Nicole Kidman's movie around the same time we did Vanilla Sky. It's Alejandro Amenábar, I'm pretty sure. And he's a great Spanish director, really smart, from Chile originally, but he lives in Spain. And when I was working for Tom Cruise's company, I was kind of hired to be their head of production, or producer, essentially. And when Vanilla Sky came along, what happened was Paula Wagner was Tom's partner. She had been his agent and then became his partner. And they had an office at Paramount Pictures. And at the time, she got a copy of the movie Abre los Ojos, and she screened it for all of us. We all watched it. And apparently Tom had seen it too. And Tom loved the movie. He thought it was fantastic, and thought it would be a very good movie to do an American language remake of that movie. And at the time, he showed it to Cameron Crowe, and Cameron Crowe loved the movie. And Cameron Crowe said, "I'd like to write it." So that was the beginning of the project. Cameron wrote it. Tom committed to being in it, and because I spoke Spanish and I knew the movie, at the time, we had to get the rights from Alejandro Amenábar. So I flew to Spain and to talk to him. And in the meantime, well, let me start that over again. I knew that they wanted the rights, and they contacted Amenábar. Now, Amenábar was interested in having Nicole Kidman in his movie, which was The Others. So it was almost like a trade. I mean, Tom and Nicole were together at the time. Nicole would do Amenábar's movie when she finished the movie she was currently doing in Australia, and we would get the rights to do the Abre los Ojos in English. So after that had happened and we knew we had the rights, I went over to meet Amenábar in Spain, and when they were prepping The Others. and I went to Madrid, and I went to the studio, and they were building sets and everything. For a variety of reasons, the movie that Nicole was in got postponed or didn't finish, the one she was doing. So she wound up pushing the dates back. So they had to slow down the set building because they didn't know when they were going to get her. In any event, it all worked out. And I went back to New York, and we decided, we were going to make the movie. Paramount, once they knew Tom wanted to do it, they were interested in it. And that was the beginning of it. And Cameron Crowe was going to direct it. So that was the start of that project. That's how it started.
Now, not to segue too much, but is that the extent of your involvement with the others, or did you also produce that one?
No, I didn't produce that. I had nothing to do particularly with it except that
facilitating.
I was just facilitating anything they needed from our side, and I got some kind of a thank you credit on that movie
because I see it's on your IMDb. I think.
Oh, I didn't put it there, but they gave me whatever credit they gave me. They gave me, but I really didn't have much to do with the actual making of it because I was making Vanilla Sky at the same time that was shooting in Spain.
How similar is this Vanilla Sky to Amenábar?
It is. Well, I'll tell you how similar it is. It's similar to the point that Cameron Crowe had a translation of the movie and actually had the movie on a kind of a mini device where he could watch it before he was doing a scene. So he really, it isn't scene for scene exact, and there are a lot of changes in the kind of silly performance values and everything else, but it is very, very close to the original movie. It's the same story right down the line.
Which one do you think was executed better?
Well, it's hard to say because they're very, very different. Amenábar himself, after he saw Vanilla Sky, he was the one who wrote a letter to Cameron Crowe, and he thanked him, and he said, I thank you for doing a great job. He said, you've done a cover of my movie. He says, my movie is based in opera, and yours is based in rock and roll. And it was true. The music we used, everything about it was so different.
This was more drowned.
It was a little, but it was.
Was it a thriller still? The
same way, and it was a terrific movie.
I love the idea.
It's a very good
movie.
Me
because I'm usually pretty good. I told you on the last one, my favorite movie of all time is The Usual Suspect.
Oh yeah, well it is. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
This kind of, I've watched some of your films, and I always keep telling you, man, you make me watch movies that I'd never watch. And I don't know how I avoided Vanilla Sky. I guess when I just kind of heard about it, it didn't click to me. I didn't really know what to expect. I figured it was something.
But it did very well, I will tell you.
Yeah, I know it did. Yeah, it did, and
probably because Tom was in it, and it was and it was interesting that Penelope Cruz played the same role in both movies.
And she's great.
And she's fantastic.
She's so adorable.
Yeah, she is wonderful.
That really was a great choice.
But no, there's a lot of interesting things that came out of that process.
Do you know how this idea came up when Amenábar wrote it?
Amenábar is a very, very interesting filmmaker, and the whole idea of it was...
This wasn't a book or anything.
No. This came out of his head, and it was really complicated and interesting. And initially, not everybody kind of got it at first. They didn't quite understand what it was. And, you had to kind of see the movie to really get the sense of what was happening. And when I got involved, which was obviously very early, because the movie had just been written, we had a script, but nothing else, because Cameron wrote the script. And I was involved in the very early details with him. I helped him find a production designer. He already knew who he wanted to have as a cameraman, who was fantastic cameraman, John Toll, one of the best. And he'd worked with John before, so they had a good relationship. And it was, I had been involved very early in it, and we were planning on shooting the movie more in New York, I think, originally, but it was so much cheaper to do it on stage at the time in LA that we only shot well, we shot 4 weeks in New York, and then we came back to L.A.
How long? What was the production schedule for the whole thing? Do you remember?
It was probably about maybe 16 weeks. I mean, it was not short.
Yeah.
But Cameron doesn't shoot anything short. He's when I first got the schedule and we broke it down, it was like 100 days. And 100 days for me, a long movie in my career would have been 50 days. 50 days is a good schedule,
Why was it so?
Well, yeah, it's just, I'll try to explain it to you. I mean, what I found out was that Cameron is, he's very detailed and very slow in the way he works. He's methodical, and it takes him a long time to get what he wants. So you really don't schedule a lot more than a page a day with him, and every detail is definitely thought out. Every not just the shot, but everything in it is very well thought out. And Tom was willing to go along with Cameron's plan, because Cameron was the director, and Tom is a terrific worker. I mean, he's great at working with almost anybody.
I hear all the time he's one of the hardest working.
Well, he will work, whatever it takes, he'll do, and he's himself. He drives himself, and in this particular case, it wasn't easy because he had to have 2.5 hours of makeup when we were doing the section of him in the makeup. And of course, there's all kinds of spoiler alerts here, but people should see the movie. But
it's 20 years old at this point. You should.
Doesn't matter,
right? But yeah.
I mean, the notion that there are a lot of interesting stories related to the makeup.
The makeup was very good. I mean, that was really convincing. It's tough to, it's not the Elephant Man, but that's almost it was hard in some ways.
It is hard because it's so real.
Yeah.
And one of the things about the makeup, which would be interesting to anybody who cares about this stuff, is that we wondered, because we went to doctors, and I spoke to a number of doctors in L.A., plastic surgeons, people like that. And I mean, the idea in the movie is that he's in a car with this woman, and because she's kind of crazy, she drives off the road, smashes the car. We presume that she's been killed, and he is scarred. I mean, his head gets all messed up. Now, what we were told by most people is that in today's medicine, anything that might have happened to him probably could be fixed if they acted on it immediately. So if right after the crash he went into emergency hospital, even if he smashed all his cheekbones and everything else, there would be a way to kind of reconstruct his self, and he wouldn't look as scarred or as awful as he looks in the movie. So we tried to figure out what would, I went to a top plastic surgeon named Harvey Zarum. And Harvey did maxillofacial surgery on kids who were, coming from the third world. He would do free surgeries on these kids while he supported himself doing celebrity boob jobs or whatever it was that he did as a plastic surgeon. But he was very, very knowledgeable. And he said, what would happen is if you had an accident, and because you were compromised or sick so that they couldn't operate on you right away, and there was a time period between the accident and the actual time when you were able to be operated on, certain things could happen to you that would not enable them to put you back the way you were.
So you had
and you'd have this. So we had to postulate in the story somehow that he wasn't operated on immediately, and that for a variety of reasons, whatever it was, that he and that he couldn't be. And in that case, you could have. We wanted to make sure it was authentic. That you could have that. So we had advisors, and we had very, very top advisors. Our makeup people our makeup woman, actually, who did almost all of the special effects makeup, spoke to doctors, spoke to plastic surgeons, and had a really good sense of what kind of scarring and everything else would make sense, and that's what we created for him. But it was a big job, and it took a lot of time.
Yeah.
And the movie otherwise was still not that easy, even in terms of the time frame that it took to make it. But Cameron tends to shoot extremely long schedules.
Now, is he like? Because I hear the other Cameron, James Cameron, I hear too that he shoots a ton of coverage. Like he does as much as he can.
He shoots a lot of coverage and he shoots a lot of takes.
Yeah.
So he'll do 20 takes, 30 takes of something until it just is.
So this one too. This
right.
Yeah.
Very, very much was the way he works. He also has another thing that he does, which is unique to him. I think he has I don't now. It's probably not a boombox, but he had a boombox on the set, and he has stacks of tapes. And during the setup, and when even almost right up to the shot, he has music playing, and he'll set the tone for the scene with a particular piece of music. It isn't necessarily the piece of music that's going to wind up playing in the soundtrack. It's really more for the actors to get them into the mood that he thinks they need to be in. So he plays music. He's very music driven, and he had a very close relationship at the time, and as far as I know, for over many movies, with our music supervisor, Danny Bramson. And Danny was tremendously effective in helping create the soundtrack later and licensing the songs and figuring out what we want, getting Paul McCartney to do a song for our movie. I mean, we had a lot. We used so many interesting pieces of music.
There's a reference there to somebody used to be his favorite Beatle, and then now it was Paul or something. I don't even remember where that was said, but I vaguely remember something like that now. So, what song did Paul?
It was called Vanilla Sky. He did the song called. There's a song called Vanilla Sky. He wrote after he saw the movie, and I believe it's like an end credit song, but it was good, cool. Very, very good. But we had a lot of most of the songs in the movie are licensed songs that we got from a lot of different artists. So,
yeah.
We had some very interesting artists, Sigaroos, and just many, many, many different ones that were really interesting. And putting together that soundtrack to work with the movie was really quite a big job. I mean, it was not a small thing. It took us a lot of time, and Cameron is extremely careful about his music choices, and most of his soundtracks are, soundtracks or compilations of lots of songs. And I mean, his own story. If you ever saw the movie Almost Famous, Almost Famous was the story of Cameron himself. He directed it, but it was the story of him when he was a young writer, and he was a kid, and he wrote for Rolling Stone. They didn't know he was a kid because he submitted articles, and then they met him, and they sent him around to concerts, and he was a major, kind of a music critic and music writer, and as he was growing up, and he knew that world pretty well. Almost Famous is about that world.
Is that what gave him the opportunity to get into screenwriting and directing and stuff? Or
I wouldn't know, but I wouldn't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it did. I mean, he was successful at writing and journalistic writing, and he was always interested in movies, and so he made that move into movies. He knew, but it did certainly affect the music, and the way he used music in the movies came a lot out of his previous career, because he was following bands all over the world, and writing about them. So
But that's a nightmare, isn't it? All these music licensing deals and stuff, that can get really, really tricky and expensive.
Well, it usually can. And Danny Bramson, who, as I said, was our music supervisor, was also the head of music at Warner Music. So
that's good.
He had a better shot at getting licenses than most anybody at that time. But the music on a major movie like that easily could run into several $1 million just licensing music for a movie like that. And this was a major studio movie, so the budget of the movie was $85 million, something like that. Whereas Could you make a movie like that? People ask this all the time. Could you make it for less? Sure, you could. I mean, you could have made that movie independently for half that probably, but it might not be the same movie. And he knew what he wanted, and he was in the right place to get it. So he was able to get what he wanted. And the biggest reason for all of that is Tom, because Tom Cruise at the time was the biggest star in the world. Not that he still isn't, but
Right.
he's done his ups and downs. He was at the very top of his career.
Well, and Cameron Diaz was no slouch.
And
either.
Cameron Diaz was major too, and so we were able.
Kurt Russell.
Kurt, a lot of these things.
So you have a lot of good casting here.
Well, there's an interesting story about Kurt Russell too. I mean, Kurt Russell was not Cameron's first choice for the role that Kurt Russell played was Robert Redford.
Okay.
And he called Robert Redford up early on. We were actually already making the movie, but that scene wasn't going to be shot till months later, right? So he called and he offered the part to Robert Redford. Now, I had met Robert Redford a number of times. I had never worked with him, but I knew him. I met him at Sundance. I knew people who knew him. He had met me once and asked me to produce something that never got made. It was one of the Tony Hillerman novels about American Indians, police officers who were American Indians. I mean, he bought the whole series and he was developing it. And he wanted me to work with him on it. Never happened. But Redford himself, and this I knew from personal experience because I had many conversations with him, and he would call him. Redford had called me up previously, and he would say, I'm going to meet you in New York. I'll be, I said, fine. I was working at the time. I was actually directing a television show in New York, and he called me up and he says, well, I'll be there on Thursday. I said, okay, I'll meet you Thursday. And he'd arrive 4 days later. I mean, he could never be on time. Never. I don't think
For anything, for some reason.
I don't think I ever had a meeting with the man where he was ever on time. I mean, and it wasn't out of disrespect. I think he just had he had an internal clock that was off, and that was just the way he was. And the truth is, I knew people who worked on movies with him. He was always late on set. He was even movies he was directing, which you would think would be a different thing. Yeah. He still would be there. The latest, I
knew 2 or 3 guys like that. They try,
cannot be on time.
Cannot be on time.
Well, he was that guy.
Yeah,
and I knew also the character that he was going to be playing in the movie, and if he did it in Vanilla Sky, was a character that is really in Tom's character's mind. He's not real. He's somebody. We don't know that. We don't find it out till the end, but he's really not a real person. He's a figment of of another character's imagination. Right. And I remember saying to, when Cameron said, oh, do you think we're going to be able to get Redford? And I said, I got to tell you something, Cameron. 2 things. Number one, I don't know how Tom is going to work with Bob. They've never worked together. They actually did later, but they never had worked together up to that point. I said, it's going to drive Tom crazy. Tom's a producer on this. The guy comes late. He can't deal with that. Tom is always early. It's really going to be hard for him. I said, but I don't think that's even going to happen. I said, because I from what I know of Redford, I can't believe Robert Redford is going to play a character who's the figment of another character's imagination. Yeah. I said, I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. And of course he didn't. Yeah. And then we were thinking of it later, and then it came to us. It came to us, and we said, wait a minute, what about Kurt Russell? And Kurt Russell loved the idea, and he was terrific in it. So, I mean, he was the right choice, let me tell you.
Yeah, he was. He did a great job, but I'm curious now because these are A players too, right? Of course, Russell at this point in his career, Tom is, the guy, picking up speed, and Kurt Russell's, done a lot of his biggest performances probably at this point, but still he's a leading man. So for him to be a relatively small role, is that ever
Well, we did. Yeah, we weren't sure he would do it. It was really a situation, Tom.
So how do you pitch something like that?
Tom called him up and said, we'd love you to do this. He thought it was interesting and unusual, and his scenes were all with Tom anyway, so he got to play with the lead in the movie, and he liked that.
Well, and
and it was a limited amount of time. We didn't need him for 16 weeks. We needed him for 3 weeks. So,
now that I think about it, it is an important role. The more I think about it, because it's still fresh. I just watched it, and I'm probably, it's one of these movies I'm probably gonna have to watch again. But he is sort of the narration throughout.
Well,
right?
in a way, he is, because he's, I mean, it's complicated, and I wouldn't want to explain it to an audience, but it isn't. The character is a character that is trying to help Tom come to grips with his life. The character that Tom plays, and it's one of the things about the movie is it's a very modern movie in some ways, because of the idea. The ideas are modern because it's about almost not reincarnation, but about living forever, or being able to live beyond your normal lifespan, and that's unusual. It's kind of there's a bit of science fiction to it, even though it's set in the real world in this time.
And I like how that problem was solved using kind of something that we sort of understand, freezing, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, it's just kind of your mind that's going. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Well, Amenábar's a really smart guy, and it was his idea, and he came up with it in the earlier film. But this was probably a bigger exploration of that whole process.
Is he seems to be kind of fascinated with this kind of stuff when you think about like Minority Report and just the other one too.
Well, those movies came later.
They did, but it seems like he kind of has a thing for this type of futuristic. What if we could use our minds to solve crimes of the future or live longer in our heads?
It's interesting you say that, because I think Vanilla Sky might have been the movie that made him start thinking about those things and opened that door for him in his head. Because if you think of the movies he did before it, you wouldn't think that.
Kind of heartthrobby sort of.
Well, there was that. There was Born on the 4th of July. There were a lot of movies that were interesting that are different. But
he's doing action and stuff, but this kind of high concept.
Well, it was two things. I think one was he'd worked with Kubrick on
Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut, which is also a pretty mind-expanding idea.
Yeah.
And so just that process had probably got him into the thinking about that. And then he had the opportunity to do Vanilla Sky, which was also, even more so.
It's ironic. Kubrick's film Eyes Wide Shut. What did you say Vanilla Sky was called in Spanish?
Open Your Eyes. Abre los ojos.
That's interesting.
It is. But and we thought about it even then, because it was right. He'd done Eyes Wide Shut, and then the next thing he's doing is Vanilla Sky, which is Open Your Eyes.
Yeah. So it's cute now because you hear the Penelope like Open Your Eyes. Yeah, now it makes sense now. The term Vanilla Sky. I get it. What was the idea for changing the name, or not just doing a on the face kind of?
Well, I think that was Cameron's thing. He just he loved the idea of this kind of Monet painting, or whatever it was, or painting that, or not Renoir, whoever it was.
It was Monet. Yeah.
Was it Monet? Okay. And the sky was this vanilla, like vanilla ice cream type of thing, and there was something about that name that just appealed to him, and he said, "Okay, I want to call it this," and nobody was going to object, and Todd was fine with it, and the studio said, "Okay, great, we'll call it."
It worked. Yeah, it makes sense, and also the way that the color timing was done, and that it kind of goes between the cold blue and the creamy vanilla sort of.
Well, that was also very, very deliberate and important.
Yeah. And I was trying to, because I caught on to that, and I was trying to figure out, okay, which part's real, which one's a dream, and then of course, all of it's kind of fabricated. Mm-hmm. But I like it in the sense that I tend to be able to start calling the twist pretty, not early, but like I can anticipate, okay, it's going to go one of three ways, I didn't see this one coming. I didn't. I thought maybe whatever they did to his face, they kind of like, and you ever see Face Off with Nick Cage and stuff? I thought maybe then, somehow the girl did it and she's actually the other girl, but she did, but it totally,
well, it was, it's a mind-bending kind of story. And a lot of people, never really had the patience to go, but enough did, that enjoyed it. I was fascinated by the process of it, and I was there every day, and it was fun making. It was fun working with the different people we had on the movie from the beginning. We had but as I said, John Toll, superb cinematographer. Betsy Hyman did all the costumes, and we had some really great people.
Now, is this because you did Francis for Tom's Company, but
no.
Not Francis. Without Limits.
Yeah, Without Limits was
for Tom's Company, but he wasn't really involved in that. So was this the first movie where you were actually working hands-on?
Yeah, this was the first movie where I was there every day with Tom. Tom would be, he was extraordinarily generous to the cast and crew. We filmed on the lot at Paramount, and usually when you film on the lot, you break for lunch and you go to the commissary. You pay for your lunch. You come back after work. He arranged to have a caterer cater the entire movie for our crew, which is expensive, which he paid for, and made sure we all ate together. We had great meals. If we ran late, he would have an In-N-Out burger truck come in and take care of the crew. He was very, and we had 2 rooms on one of the stages where we had, if we were working a long day, like a 14-hour, 15-hour day, he would have, in the late afternoon, he'd have his assistants arranged to have a couple of masseuses brought in, and anybody who was not working and needed to get a massage, he would let them have a massage.
I want to work for Tom.
He's great. No, the caterer was top quality.
Yeah.
Everything was really well done. Very, very, very high end in terms of the way the movie was done.
Now, logistically, did you actually lock down Central Park and Times Square for this movie? You actually did it?
It's
not some trick?
No, there was no trick at all. In fact, the first thing that happened, Tom was not in New York while we were prepping the movie. He was in Spain with Nicole, and they were shooting her movie, the Amenábar movie, the others.
Yes.
So, but he called me up and he said, I had just gotten the script and I was working on it, and he said, this is going to be fun. We're going to have a great time. He says, we got to shut down Central Times Square. He says, can you do that? And, me being a cocky idiot, I said, yeah, sure we can. Sure we can. I hung up and I said, holy shit. Now what? What do I do? So
that's a big matzo ball to chew on, like Seinfeld would say.
First of all, it's not something that in any way you could do today. You got to remember when this was done, for a variety of reasons. But even then, I had to go to the city. I had to make all kinds of, literally what we were doing was we were shutting off 7th Avenue and Broadway, if anybody knows New York, from 57th Street to 38th Street. No traffic at all. We had to clear that area. Now, we knew we were not going to be able to get that from the city for more than a very brief period of time. So we had to figure out how much time do we need that for. And we figured if we could get it cleared for an hour and a half, a full hour and a half, we could. And we planned out the shot that we were going to do, which is there's one major shot. There's a lot of other shots after that, but there's one major shot, which is, and it's a complicated shot because it starts with a man with a Steadicam looking at Tom as he pulls the car in. It moves all the way around him and then starts to go up high in the sky. So in order to do that, you have a guy on a Steadicam on a wheelchair that is moving towards Tom, going around him. As it gets, around him, the wheelchair's pulled away, and the guy on the Steadicam backs onto a platform on the ground, which is the bottom of a crane, and it starts lifting him up. And so you're turning from one direction, north, all the way around south. And you
Also, that
so you see
clear.
completely clear from one side to the other, almost 360 degrees. And we look down, and it has to be empty on both sides. We practiced the shot on in the same spot the previous weekend, because it had to be done on a Sunday. There was no chance we could do it on a regular work day. We'd be tying up the whole city. So we had to do it. And it was the winter time, so it didn't get light until, say, 6:30, 6:30, So whereas in the, if it was the summertime, it could have been light by 5:30, So you really, maybe it wasn't even fully light until 7. So you really had to have that closure from about 7 to 8:30. That was that was what we were hoping for. And so we wound up taking a crane on a weekend before we shot the scene, and we practiced where there was we didn't stop the traffic. The crane was on there was a little island in the middle of the street there, and the crane sat on the island, so it wasn't interrupting traffic, and we just worked our way around and wanted to see, we were watching the cycles of the lights from green to red, how long did it take? So we figured out it was a couple of minutes. And so we wanted to be able to figure out a way that we could do an entire take within one cycle of the lighting. If we could get it if we could have it planned out well enough to be able to do that, we figured that's how we figured out how much time we needed. We needed a certain number of takes. We would have to, so we figured if we had an hour and a half, we're going to have enough time to get that shot. Once we get that shot, there are other shots that are also empty, but it doesn't mean the whole place has to be. I mean, you could just empty.
Yeah, now you
7th Avenue, and you leave.
That's a little easier.
Open up Broadway and just use 7th Avenue.
Yeah.
So we were able to figure it out. So we figured it out technically, but then we had to get the city to agree to it. And New York is pretty good about, had always been very good with film crews, and they would allow you to do a lot of things. But this was more than anyone had ever.
They shut down Times Square.
When we made the final ask, we had to have. They said, "Well, we're going to take a meeting. We're going to have a meeting at the mayor's, film office, and we're going to have all the key people down there, and it'll either be a yes or no. That's it." So, on that particular day, I brought Tom. And that was a big thing because Tom was, you couldn't take him anywhere. People were all over. Yeah. So Tom came into the office, and I said, Tom, you do your act. He went in and pitched out, how important this was and how great it was. And it was really hard to see that anyone was going to turn us down. He was so charming. And so we basically told him, we would use lots of police officers and we'd have PAs on every corner. We do, and down in the subway so no one came up during the shot. All of that was, we showed him a plan, and we had done a tremendous amount of planning. I had a production manager just on that one location for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks almost. And his plan was he had to know every business. Now, a lot of businesses weren't open on Sundays, but a lot are in New York. They're open, 24/7. So we had to know every business, make sure that we couldn't give money to them because if we gave money to one, we'd have to give it to everybody. We could never afford it. So we had to kind of appease them another way. And we asked their permission, and we got to know the people. We got them to embrace the whole idea, told them it'd only be a couple hours, whatever. But we knew the name and phone number of every business from 38th Street to 57th Street. Wow. And that was all one production manager laying out a map, figuring out we had all these drawings and everything to figure it out. It was a very, very complicated day.
And for about, what, 30 seconds?
30 seconds of screen time, maybe.
What did that cost altogether?
Well, the whole movie, as I told you.
No, I mean, like just that.
It's hard to say. Yeah. I never broke it out specifically for that. I mean, the cost.
It's just the cops.
The location cost was much, and the cops. No, in New York, they have a tactical police force that they give you. So, but they had to have they had to have 20 cops that day or whatever it was. And then we hired extra production assistants with walkie-talkies so that we between every 2 cops, we had a production assistant. We had several of them because there's a subway station right in the middle of the shot, and people could be coming up out of the subways. So we had people down there. When we were ready to roll, we said, make sure you don't let anybody up on the street. Yeah, I mean, we couldn't prevent people, but people are generally pretty interested in what you're doing. And we said, it's only going to be a minute. You just stand still for a minute.
So you would shoot a take for one light cycle, stop, let people go through?
Well, actually, when we actually did it, we didn't. I mean, the light cycle was just to get us in the habit of being able to do it very quickly. When we actually shot it, we didn't worry about the lights because we cleared the street completely. And we were able to do 4 or 5 takes of that shot, but we had really honed the process down so that we all really know exactly what we were doing.
But based on the, I'm going to tie in a conversation we had on another podcast when you were talking about was it the cinematographer, the art director for, I think it was Without Limits, that he was kind of slow. But you said it's okay because there's not a lot of lighting. Now, Cameron's the slow guy here. But was that concerning at all, knowing that he shoots?
No. I mean, it was just he's not, the individual takes don't take any less time than anybody would do. It's just that he will do 50 of them.
Well, that's what I mean, though.
And we knew that, he knew going in, he didn't have 50 takes.
Yeah, so
he was lucky if he had 10 and maybe only 5. And he had to be sure, so that we made sure we rehearsed the shot within an inch of its life, so that by the time he got out there was very little for a director to do once he knew what the shot was.
Everybody knew what it was.
The only thing was to talk to Tom about how he looked. There was no dialogue.
I mean, you're right. There was no.
So once everybody knew what the shot was, the director could sit in the camper and watch it on a screen.
Just a cinematographer.
Yeah. It was really
the blocking, I guess.
So once we had that down, it still wasn't easy, but it was a big deal.
Is that the biggest logistical feat that you think you've pulled in your career, or in terms of, or not logistics in terms of like equipment and stuff, but like this kind of a thing?
I think in a way it is, because I don't know anybody who's ever closed down Times Square like that. And after that, by the way, they years later they repaved that whole area and turned it into so you could never do that shot again because there's no traffic at that. It's totally different than it was. At that time, the street was open on both sides, and you could drive all the way through it. Now, you can't even do that anymore. They have, the whole street is redone. But right at that point, but it was an enormous undertaking, and we were looking for the place to do the most iconic way, and that was probably it. The only place. It might have been more complicated if we were trying to do it at Trafalgar Square in London or something like that, but I don't know.
No, but
or Piccadilly Circus or something like that.
No, but people know this.
Times Square is
internationally, people know Times
and all the signs and all that stuff. Yeah, it was about the biggest thing we did. The other thing we did 2 shots on that day, because you have to remember, after an hour and a half, 2 hours, we're done. So that wasn't a whole day. It was only a couple of hours. So if we started at 6 a.m, by noon, certainly we were going to be finished with that shot and everything we had to do and wrap out. So we had to find something else we could do on that day to justify the cost of doing that one thing. We didn't want to make that just the whole day. So we shot another major shot up on where her car crashes. And that was shot with like 5 cameras or 6, maybe more, 7 cameras really, because there was a camera in the car. We had to rig the car and rig the fence. There's a fence there. We had to take out the real fence and put in a dummy fence, a breakaway fence. And the car crashes through the fence and goes down and lands on the front of it.
Yeah.
It has the land, and it had to land.
That was precise. That had to go right in the corner.
No, it had to go right where, and the guys who were the special effects guys literally put an X on the ground that said, that's where it's going to land. And they rigged it almost with what would be like a slingshot. I mean, they had it on a track, the car, for the shot where it goes through. There wasn't anybody in it, but there was a dummy in it or something. But there was a camera in it, and an IMO camera,
Right.
so that you got the point of view of the car going through.
Mm-hmm.
We had cameras all around, in every possible place you could have a camera, and the car had to do it right. And again, we did that. I think we had 3 cars.
Mm-hmm.
We got it on the first take. We did another one. We did another one just for safety. But that was a pretty amazing shot, mainly because the street it was 96th Street in New York, and it's on Riverside Drive, and where the car goes is just off of an entrance off of literally the West Side Highway, the freeway. So it's that's a pretty dangerous area to be working from.
Yeah.
And again, we had to do that, but we brought the cops that we had downtown up there to help us, and they blocked everything off, and we were able to get it. But it was a big day.
So in terms of, I mean, that had to be sort of damaging to the pavement and the wall, crashing your car in there, no? Or did that just hold up?
I mean, it wasn't really. I mean, it was the pavement
Held up, but
held up, and I don't think. I mean, if there was any, we obviously, if we had to pay to replace anything, we said we would. We'll bring in a crew to fix the street if there were any problems. But there really,
but it didn't was,
be amazed at
yeah, that's impressive.
There's grass all the time,
right? But not off of a bridge into a wall.
Mm.
But what happens to the third car? Does anybody get to keep that then? Because you didn't use it.
No, we didn't use it. We probably gave it back to the company that we got them from.
Yeah.
I mean, these are period cars.
Right.
So we were destroying a car. One of them, actually, both of them had to have all the guts taken out so that you didn't, I mean, you took anything in it.
You can slip.
Anything that might have blown off and
of course,
hurt anybody. So you had to be very careful, but you had to look exactly like a car.
Yeah.
So, and it also had to have a lot of enough weight in it to make it hit. Otherwise, if you lightened it up too much, it might have floated off. It might not have looked like a car really crashing. So all of that had to be thought out.
Yeah.
But movies, the magic of the movies is what we all love. We love the fact that we're doing something that is going to give you the illusion of something that you haven't seen, and that's the fun of it. And that movie particularly had a lot of that. There was a lot of illusion in it. That was a great deal of fun when he jumps off the building.
So I was going to ask about that next, actually.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you do that? Because now, there's a lot more. Well, I mean, it's 2001, so it's not like there wasn't a ton of, computer assistance with that stuff and compositing. But was that looked to me, and again, it's not that it looked fake. It's just because I have, a little bit of a keen eye for it. But that it looked like the initial rooftop was on a stage, and then what was the jump? I mean, how did you do the camera work for that?
The original, the rooftop was built on scaffolding in the, where the Spruce Goose is in Long Beach. Long Beach, where the Queen Mary is. Right next to it is the hangar for the Spruce Goose. Uh-huh. It's enormous. It goes to 80 feet high. Okay. So it's higher than just about any stage.
So you actually had it elevated.
We had it elevated probably 50 feet off the ground.
I assumed it was just on a stage.
No. We built the roof on the top of the scaffolding and had green screens around it. But we actually were filming up high, and we did a real. It really went over. We did a jump into an airbag.
Yeah.
So the first part of the first part of the jump was real.
Yeah. Okay.
Real. It was real. It wasn't off a real building, but it looked like it was off a real building, and it was off a high position, and we could get a very low camera looking up at it that you could see the distance. So that was real, and anything that we could do that gave the verisimilitude of being real, we did. But and we had a lot of green screens. Today, it would have been easier to shoot that because there's a lot more visual effects that you could have done, but we didn't use a lot of stuff that was not being used generally. So it was a lot of new things.
Once you had the jump, and of course you need to composite and put everything on the green screens, but how did you get the footage of the actual drop down the building then?
Well, the drop down the building was done in New York.
Yeah.
And what we did there was we went totally different time. I went into New York with a crew. I didn't have the director with me. I just was with the visual effects. I was second unit directing. I was with the visual effects group, and we had all of the guys who did it, and we had a descender cable off the top of a real building, and right at I'm trying to think. Yeah, I guess it was probably was Fifth Avenue and 57th Street, right in that area, or maybe it was Madison, whatever street it was. It was a very tall building, and we got permission to drop a cable and literally drop a camera on the cable down the the descender cable protected it, but we had to literally drop it all the way down to give the point of view of that shot. And that was a real we did that, but it's a visual effect shot because you did it with a separate crew and all that. But we did that separately.
Now this is all 35 millimeter. 35. You're doing this not digital cameras, because it'd be easy to drop a digital camera down like that. But this is
no. We were dropping a 35 Arri, not an Arri. Actually, it was like a Panaflex.
Yeah.
But it was and we, it was very well protected. But we did drop it.
But it's probably quite a rig.
Yeah, you're bringing the rig down on this cable. Couple of other things that we did too was we did all of the point of views from the rooftop. The same crew at the same time, we went to a building that was correct for it, and we did all of the shots from the rooftop, so that whatever you saw when he jumps was the real New York skyline. Now, an interesting thing about that, we were filming it, and this was in September. No, not September. This was the year. It was the summer of 2001. And we're shooting the rooftops. This is the summer. We finished it all. And of course, in the distance, you can see the Twin Towers down the end of the thing. The next month, the Twin Towers came down.
Yeah.
The movie was being released not until maybe December, I think, December or January. So it was the very end of the year. And it was a big issue. We had to sit down with everybody at 20th Century Fox and say, do we leave them in? Do we take them out? Do we wipe them out? Or do we just leave them in? And, feeling that people would react to that, even though they're in the distance. And I'm pretty sure we just left them in. We just said, no, we're just going to leave them. It is what it was,
Crazy.
It's crazy world. Yeah. To even think about it, but you had to think about those things because we had shot it when they existed, and by the time the movie came out, they did not. So
wow.
So these are. It's almost like another piece of the movie in a way.
Yeah. That's crazy.
The craziness of the movie.
Kind of like the. Yeah. No. Never mind. I was going to go down a different route here, but that's crazy. Luckily you didn't, because knowing Tom, not personally, but from the stuff he does, he tends to want to go for the biggest and the highest thing. So luckily you didn't jump there in the film, right? That was
no. You're right. You're right, and it could have. It's not. It would not have been an unlikely choice.
Right.
We happen to be. The movie takes place pretty much Midtown Manhattan because that's where the offices of his editorial, the magazine that he runs, which is kind of supposed to be like Vanity Fair or something like that, is all Midtown. So we did everything Midtown. But I got to tell you, you're right. If those buildings had been close to where we would shot, I'm sure you might have able to do that. Yeah. I didn't want to think about that, but we didn't. In any event, though, that was. I'm just saying these are considerations on making movies that you never think of.
It's like you said the thing about Without Limits. You're making a movie about the '76 Olympics. It's not about Munich, but Munich. Yeah. The terror attack did happen, so what do? Do you ignore it? Do you not? Those are, because it wasn't part of the plot for your movie. But you can't just not leave it in.
Well, it wasn't, and it was, because Prefontaine was at the real 76 Olympics when this happened.
Sure.
So in that case, yes, it was part of the story.
Yeah.
But it might not have been. You could have done a story where, that you just want to deal with the Olympics and you don't want to deal with that event.
Yeah.
This was not that. So, I mean, the real world does enter into our thinking about everything we do.
Yeah.
But
you were shooting this in the wintertime in New York. Weren't you worried about the snow or?
We were worried about, well, not so much snow, because you don't get a lot of snow in New York in the wintertime.
Oh, okay.
Usually you don't.
I'm naive.
And this was if you're going to get snow in New York, it's usually in January and February. At least this is what we were told. And we were shooting in November. We actually shot in New York from September, October, or October, November. I mean, just in those months.
Gray skies.
It was gray skies, and there was a lot of that. But we
so you had to offset that with warm lighting, and then you obviously did sky replacement for the.
Well, we did. In certain places we definitely did, and then a lot of it. Yeah, I mean, we definitely had to grade the sky the way John wanted it to look. I mean, you got some blue sky days, but where it's crisp and cold, but that very kind of icy blue, and we had enough days of that we could use those skies any other day. I mean, we had them. So and we didn't have. I mean, yes, we had a fair number of exteriors there. We had a number of things that we did that were, where we had to do the part of them in New York and the other half in California. We were shooting, for example, on the day of the Macy's Day Parade, and we're in his apartment looking out the windows, and the balloon comes by.
Yeah.
Well, on the real day, the balloons it was incredibly windy, and the balloons just start right where his apartment building was, and they had them down. They didn't want to bring them fully because they were blowing all over the place. Okay. So we had to account for that in the final shoot to make sure it all worked. But I mean, these are the complications when you're mixing half of the shoot in one location, and then you got to match that in the other location. So it was pretty consequential. I mean, another thing was like the Dakota, which is the building that he lives in. We shot the interiors of some of the hallways on the real building, but the apartment we shot all on a set. We built the entire apartment that he lived in. So again, they had a match, and they did. All of that had to be uniquely the same.
So we're coming up on an hour here, but do you have any? This one went quick. Do you have any kind of fun anecdotes? Anything crazy that doesn't have much to do with the film itself? Maybe on set, like you were talking about the disheveled lady with at the motel with. There's something crazy that happened on this one, or
a lot of things happen. You got to remember here's. I mean, I'll just give you a context of the period of time. And this is, it's kind of gossipy, but true. Tom was married to Nicole Kidman, and he broke from Nicole Kidman right in the middle of the movie.
Oh.
And he came on set one day and told the entire crew. He stopped everything early in this show. He said, you're going to hear a lot of stuff on the news. You're going to hear that Nicole and I are no longer together, and I don't want it to affect you. I mean, he was very careful to make sure that he says, I would hope you don't talk to reporters, and we're still extremely close. There's no, he didn't want to very private. He didn't want to give any details. He says, but I know there are probably going to be a lot of news people around, and this is an issue that you're going to have to know about. So I don't want you to hear it this afternoon or tonight on the news. I wanted you to hear it from me, and that, I'm okay, and she's okay, and everything's going to be fine. It's just, we made that decision. And it was interesting too, because, you hindsight is everything. I mean, at the time you wonder, oh, well, he's He's on set. He's hanging around with Penelope Cruz. He actually dated her after that. So I'm wondering whether that had anything to do with it, but it didn't. I mean, everybody had a million stories about what was going on, but Tom, as totally composed as he was as an actor, he was also even more so about his own life. So you didn't, basically nobody was really privy to his private thoughts, not even Paula, who was his bid partner. I mean, everybody was pretty much out of that. He kept his life separate from his movie.
How does a guy like him get around? You can't just go out and go buy a bagel. Does he has doctor everywhere?
No. He has people, bodyguards. He drives around in cars that have tinted windows.
Yeah. Does he do things?
He does.
Just go out for dinner and all?
No. In New York, he had his little contingent of cars take care of him, but he was always, he would go out. I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. Not a funny story. It's just on the scouting of the movie. This was a big deal because it was such a big movie for me. I hadn't worked on a movie that was $100 million or whatever that was. It was a very, expensive movie. 80 million, whatever I said. It was pretty high.
Well, today's equivalent.
Yeah, today it would have been double that.
Yeah.
By the way, we one day, most people know that Tom flies. I mean, he loves to fly. He's a pilot. He owns a couple of planes. He owns an aerobatic plane he likes to fool around with. And he also owns at the time, was a G4 jet, And we were going on a location scout. It was myself, the cameraman. I think we must have had the production designer with us. Obviously, the director, and maybe Tom and one or two other people. So Tom says, well, come on, I'll fly us into New York. We'll all go into New York and we'll scout together. Okay, so we were all going on Tom's plane. Tom's plane is at the Burbank Airport in a back, a hangar way in the back. And we all met there early in the morning. We get on the plane, and Tom's there, all of us. And he has his crew taking care of us. It was fascinating. I'd never flown on a private plane like that before. Everybody assumes you produce movies, you probably fly everywhere private. Now, I'm lucky to fly coach, anywhere. So this was a big deal. And in order to go to New York City, we didn't fly into New York City. We flew into Teaneck, New Jersey. And then from Teaneck, he had a helicopter waiting to take us to New York. So the way it worked was, we fly into Teaneck, we get onto this kind of Huey, this big helicopter. We take the helicopter to the East River. There's a heliport on the East River in New York, and he's got a minibus, a big minibus waiting for us to take us all to dinner. And we had our bags with us and everything. We threw our bags in the back of the minibus, and we were going to dinner at Peter Luger's, which is a famous steakhouse in Brooklyn. And it's famous for two reasons. I mean, it's famous because it's probably one of the best steakhouses in the world. And you go there, it's expensive, but it's like the floors have sawdust on them. It's really very cool place. They don't take credit cards. You can't get a reservation there unless you order, usually weeks in advance. But Tom Cruise was able to get us a big table, and it all worked. And obviously, he took care of the whole thing. And it was like, I felt like I was in Disneyland. I never.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I mean, the whole trip was just phenomenal. We go there, and of course we stayed in our hotel. We flew back on normal regular aircraft. He went on to do whatever he was doing, but it was really.
And he piloted you over.
No, he didn't pilot. No, he doesn't pilot. He wouldn't pilot a jet at that time. I don't even think he was jet rated.
Right.
But he became, after that, he did become jet rated. But a number of, John Travolta has a 707, and he pilots it himself. He's a major pilot too. A lot of these actors love to fly. Another actor who's, I'm just trying to think. My brain went cold. Star Wars.
What Skywalker's
Not Skywalker, but who am I thinking of now?
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford flies planes and helicopters. He's obviously he was in a plane crash not that long ago. I mean, it was a few years ago. But a lot of these actors like to fly private, and they always travel on private planes. And I understand it from their point of view. It isn't so much because they think, it's not just because they can, but it also kind of keeps them away from crowds that, going through an airport, Tom Cruise walking through an airport, he's going to be mobbed everywhere he goes. This way, at least, they can keep it private.
Well, now some airports are kind of having this ultra premium. You can go into this private terminal and they'll take you straight to the airplane for some of this stuff. But
tell me about that.
Yeah, I know. I think it's like $1,000 or something, and you can go into this little private thing, and then they take you straight to the plane. But yeah.
Well, that's the way he flies. But I think it's a necessity. He has no choice. He's got to go that way.
Of course.
The rest of us, though, we're not. It was a big boost. It was early. It was before we had started the movie. It was during prep. And it kind of gave us all this is what big movies are like.
Yeah.
Who knows that world? It was fun.
Well, that's that's what probably a $200,000 day trip right there. Just jumping on that plane.
I have no idea. Another thing, though, I will tell you is that I got a call from the insurance company that insures the movie, and they said, "I know Tom flies, but he can't fly when we're making the movie." He is not allowed to fly his own planes. He can fly in a plane. Right. He can't fly his own planes during that period, unless, the premium was insane. It was like $2 million, that he'd have to put up, and even that wouldn't cover it really, because if you lost him, there was no movie.
$90 million investment.
So the premium was so high.
Yeah.
And he said, he came to me because he didn't know what it was. And I said, well, Tom, you can't fly. And I thought he was going to, because he does whatever he wants,
Right.
And he understood completely. He says, no, I know I could pay they want me to pay the premium myself. I'm not paying the premium. I won't fly.
Yeah.
So during that period, he did not.
It sounds like from your stories, but also others, that when he's in work mode, he takes it very seriously, and he won't really dick around and be too ego driven. It's like
no, he's not. Well, he's not ego driven really at all. He's much more performance driven. He wants to make sure that he wants to make sure that all the actors are taken care of properly, but he also wants to make sure, it's very important to him that everybody is working at the top of their game in every category. The other actors, he expects them to be on set on time, doing what they have to do, as long as they're, there's no other reason why they shouldn't be there. They should be there because he's there.
Huh.
And he's doing it. And they're getting paid plenty of money, so
lead by
be there,
example.
Yeah. And he does. In that respect, he does. The whole Scientology business doesn't necessarily. It never really entered into my life.
Was he already then?
Oh, he's been a Scientologist for a very long time, but it is something that, and I've heard in other situations, he's. Not that he proselytizes so much, but I think that he definitely is and was a member of that group. And if you're a young employee and you want to learn about it, he's perfectly willing to take care of your, if you need to go, But it was pretty clear from the beginning I wasn't interested in becoming a Scientologist. I'm rarely interested in anything related to any religion, be it fringe or any otherwise. I'm not terribly religious myself, although I have a religion. I was born something that I care about, and I care about the, the cultural aspects of it. But I'm not,
You're not a practice.
I'm not a major practicing religious person. So,
Did that ever get weird with his Scientology? Does he try to kind of hawk it every once in a while? No,
he didn't.
not just to you, but in general.
He didn't at that time. To me, as I say, some of the younger employees were asked if they were interested in it, right. And if they were, and it wasn't so much him because his sisters work for him. They're Scientologists. He's got other people around him who are, but his partner wasn't. I mean, Paula Wagner is not a.
Did you learn anything about that whole thing? I mean, working with them, is there like, because I always try to find out, like, a guy like Tom Cruise, successful, smart.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Scientology thing, to me, with all due respect, it's based on L. Ron Hubbard's science fiction books and all
right.
that, and right. So to me, it just seems like, with all seriousness, how does a guy like him really buy so heavily into something like that? And did you get a glimpse into what the logic behind it might be, or maybe I'm missing something?
No, I don't think so. I think he grew up with he never really had a father since he was a kid, and I don't know any more than any amateur psychologist does, so I have no idea. I mean, he went out with a woman and was married to her who was a Scientologist, and she must have taken him to meetings, and he liked the idea of whatever it was. And, I don't know what personally attracted him to that idea. Hard to say. It's just that I think even before that, I mean, he's somebody who would have been religious in whatever religion he was in. And
he commits to things.
He committed to it, and then, whatever it was, he wasn't getting anything from it, and this was another opportunity, and he went for it. And more power to him if he likes it. I mean, I'm not in any way interested in the history of it, and I tried to avoid any issues that related to it. But as I say, he was not, when I was with him anyway, proselytizing to me or any of the people that I was working with.
Yeah.
Does it inform his work? Maybe, or maybe it just gives him a set of thought processes that help him be the guy he is. I don't know. But I mean, it's as long as it didn't enter into the process of the movie, it didn't matter.
Yeah, and that's, I'm all for, anyone, as long as you're respectful to others.
Sure.
I'll be respectful.
That was important, and he's definitely respected.
Yeah.
So.
Did you ever get the sense, though, because sometimes with things like this, I feel like I get the sense that on the outside, you have to kind of obviously adhere to, okay, this is Scientology, I truly believe in this, it's the religion stuff. But then when you learn about the inner workings of it, it feels a bit like an organization that's there to protect and serve and keep each other, kind of. So, and that can be very attractive too. And sometimes I get the impression that some of these guys, they join these types of things, not so much because they actually buy into the faith itself, but because it's not a mafia in a criminal kind of way, but it's good to have a huge organization with tons of money and power that has your back no matter what. Did you ever get the sense that it's a little bit more of a power play?
I would think it would be different. No, I didn't feel that way, although I could understand it. I mean, the thing is, Tom gives as much credibility to the religion as the religion gives to him.
That's true.
Even more so. I think the very fact that he's in it probably attracts people to it because they're interested in who he is and they think of him. So that is a little weird, and I mean it's not weird.
But give him extra positions of power because, but
it certainly gives him some level of closed protection in a way, and some comfort in that. And why he needs it or why he wants it is really more something that's in his head, not mine. So but the more important thing for me was that I didn't want to be in a situation where I was going to be forced to drink somebody else's Kool-Aid. That was not my interest. I was there to make a movie and to care about the art of it,
right.
And everything else was just extraneous. And as long as it didn't interfere with the work.
Well, but that's the same with any religion. That has nothing to do with Scientology. That's also when a Hasidic Jew guy comes over and wants to do the tefillin stuff, or a Christian guy wants to, bless you and stuff. I think that's just I'm working. I appreciate it with all due respect.
No, and I respect it. And I respect it, and I respect that it's good for you. It just may not be something I want to do. That's all. End of story,
Yeah.
But I will say one thing further about, we could probably do a whole other session on this movie, because we talked a lot about technical stuff.
Right.
And we talked a lot about some of the, those aspects of it. But the movie is, I think, interesting enough that we could do a deeper dive in it at some other time.
Yeah.
So maybe we will.
Let's do Vanilla Sky Part 2.
Yeah, we might do that.
Coming to your screen soon.
Okay.
For now, though, I bid you adieu.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay.
I had already left home earlier, but I just had my little dream and 1,500 euros in my pocket, and that's it. Without my father's support, either moral nor financial, I went to London.
Were they pissed because you didn't finish medical school?
Because they didn't believe acting could be like a sustainable career. Well, I proved them wrong.
Yeah.